So good to all of you. It's wonderful to see you this morning. Let's bring our attention to the room and be prepared to start our worship service this morning. I'm delighted that you all made it out in better conditions than last Sunday, but still snowy and chilly, obviously. When we come together as a congregation, we're celebrating our support and connection in community, the depth of our commitment and our caring and our journey together in faith. If you are new to us today, well, I'm just delighted that you chose to show up. Good morning.
Good morning.
Everybody say good morning.
Good morning.
Now you've got a whole room of people that you just met, so I just want you to know that we're delighted to have you, and there is no quiz later about names or anything else, so don't worry.
Good to know.
And today we're going to continue our focus on UU history and the underlying values of our faith as we look at two more of our 8 principles. We're going to look at 2 and 3 today. We'll talk, obviously that's my job to share with you, so we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. As is our custom and our honor, we remember the heritage of this land by acknowledging its original stewards and inhabitants. In our ongoing journey of reconciliation, we reflect on the Adirondack and the Haudenosaunee people, as well as many others, who live and continue to live in these treaty and territory lands. It's important for all who live here to be respectful in our relationship to one another as we consider the decisions we are making now and for the future. Christine, if you'd be helpful in lighting the chalice flame this morning, and Liam, if you'll give us the words, we will say them together as we light the symbol of our faith. In this flame, we witness the power of transformation, awed again by the wonder of life. We are grateful to be vital to this living universe and inspiring community. How do you feel about singing together this morning? A little bit? Okay.
Wonderful.
Let's, I'm going to ask for some help to get everyone a hymnal, because I'm going to ask you to actually look at your hymnal later when we talk about our principles, so it's good to have a hymnal. And when you get it this morning, turn to number 95. I think it's called There Is More Love Somewhere. Are you familiar with that one? Oh.
Yep.
Well, we're going to learn from it.
Over eager.
Number 95. It's very simple. I'll try to sing it and then we'll learn it. Let's just remain seated for this one. Everyone got one? Okay. So this is how this song goes, or my approximation of that. There is more love somewhere. If you know it, sing along. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. There is more hope somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more hope somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. There is more peace somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more peace somewhere. There is more joy somewhere.
somewhere.
Oh, that sounded good, good job. So let me tell you the story this morning. We say it's for all ages, and I think all ears can benefit from hearing a story. Today's story is about, we got some kidlets. You better bring some kids in, thank you. I found we only had Sean's little person, but we have others.
One of my other little.
One of your other persons, okay. Yeah, I know. Again, I don't take that person.
It's pretty steep.
I'm gonna tell you, if you have a choice to, be around people, and play, it kind of sounds fun.
Are we listening or is there something to see?
There isn't anything to see, so you just have to listen. I find pictures for
I
that.
can see you.
You can see me, that's it too. Hi there, come on down. Sit on the floor, whatever makes you happy. You just be happy.
Whoa, center stage, holy
Ooh,
smokes.
right there. That's right. You can look at the camera. You can say hi to
Look at
everybody that's
you.
online. That's nice. Hi. Hello, everybody. Maureen's there. Great.
That smile.
So I don't know how many of you are familiar, but this is a story about Coyote. And stories about Coyote come out of the history and the background of indigenous people. And Coyote is often thought of as sort of a trickster. He's a character that may go one way and be predictable, or may go another way and not be so predictable. So we watch what Coyote does. And this Coyote lives in a place where there are lots of trees and bushes, and it's very lush with lots of grass and creatures around like birds and rabbits. And it's in Canada, by the way, so there are moose. And there's all kinds of other creatures you can imagine, insects and creepy crawlies and, all kinds of interesting things are around in this area. And in this place, Coyote's lived there for quite a while, and he knows that he can start his fire, and he can pull out his flute and his drum, and he can sing songs and play whatever to his heart's desire. So this is a very special kind of coyote animal who can make fires and play instruments and sing songs, and he can dance. He can get up anytime he wants and just dance around, play his instruments, sing his songs, make himself happy, and he loves it there. And then when he gets tired, he can lay beside his warm fire and sleep and dream the night away. But sometimes Coyote gets very cranky because his sleep is disturbed by the singing of the birds who just will not leave him alone and let him rest. They sing their songs night and day, and he gets really fed up with them, and that makes him cranky. He wants to shout at them to stop it. And then there's Rabbit, who's kind of silly with her funny long legs, and she asks him questions, and she bothers him with things she wants to talk about, and if he's trying to play his flute or his drum, she wants to help, and he just wants to be let alone sometimes. And Moose, well, Moose has those funny, weird antlers. I mean, what kind of a creature looks like that? And Moose is always standing out to his knees in the marsh, and Coyote doesn't think that looks very comfortable. And he's always splashing around and bellowing his big voice, and that disturbs Coyote's thoughts. And he just wonders, why can't they just leave him alone sometimes? So one day, Coyote finds himself in a place where he is just frustrated. I don't know if you've ever found yourself there, but all of a sudden, all the things that have been bugging him just come to the surface right there in front of him, and he's just so irritated, and he decides that he cannot take any more of these creatures around him and their noise and their disruption, so he decides he's gonna leave. He's gonna leave this place that he loves because he doesn't love all the noise and the disturbance. So he packs up his drum and his flute, and he wanders off because he's gonna find a place where he can be alone. Now Rabbit, she saw him leave, and she decides to follow. She's not gonna leave him alone. She hopped ahead, and then she came back, she hopped ahead on the trail, and then she came back and she said, Coyote, Coyote, Coyote. He's trying to ignore her. I saw something you should know about up ahead. Do you want me to tell you what it is? Now Coyote is trying really hard to ignore these creatures, and so he decides to ignore her. He doesn't respond. He was curious, of course, but he decided just to ignore it. And so Rabbit hops off ahead again, and she looks up over the little hill, and she comes back to Coyote and she asks him again, "Are you sure you don't want to know what's up there? I've seen it." And again, Coyote, determined, doesn't say anything actually. He refuses to look at her and he just keeps walking away. So Rabbit shrugged her little shoulders and she went away. And that evening, something very strange happened. When Coyote located a quiet place to spend the night, he found that when he built his fire, he could no longer remember his songs. All he could do was play his flute and his drum, and he danced a little, but he couldn't remember his songs. And that was strange because he'd never forgotten them before. So the next morning, it was quiet, so he slept well, but the next morning he started off on his journey again, and he soon came to the edge of the marsh. It was large, of course, and he couldn't see his way across it, and so he started to go through the water and the high grasses on his own. And soon he saw Moose, as Moose always is, up to his knees in mud and weeds and high grasses. And Moose saw Coyote, who was now, covered in water, and he said, "Coyote, I know a dry path through the marsh if you want me to help you." And Coyote, sort of rolled his eyes to himself and ignored Moose because he didn't need any help. He was determined to ignore people, those that had irritated him in the past. So Moose asked him again, "Can I help you?" And when Coyote again refused to answer him, Moose gave up and went back to feeding on the weeds. And eventually, Coyote got through the marsh, found some dry ground on the other side, and hauled himself out to dry off. He made a fire so that would help him dry off and he could rest a little bit. But again, something strange happened this night. This time when he tried to play his flute and his drum, he couldn't remember how they worked. Well, he was a little disturbed. That was really odd. All he was able to do was just kind of dance around a little bit, but he couldn't remember how to use his instruments. He couldn't remember his songs, and he was a little frustrated again. But he slept, and the next morning he got up and got ready to go on with his journey. Now he was out of territory that he'd never seen before, so he was a little bit afraid, and he was upset because he couldn't remember his songs or how to play his instruments. But he still remained very determined to get away from the creatures who had disturbed him in the past. He walked on until he came to a small stream, and it was beautiful there, surrounded by lovely trees and bushes, and the water was fresh and cool. And because he was a bit tired and very thirsty, he decided to take a nap. Just as he was falling asleep, the birds and the insects in the bushes began to make their voices heard by singing their songs. He jumped awake. He was angry that they could sing and a little jealous too because he'd forgotten his own songs. And so he reacted and he barked at them and told them to go away. And they were so offended and so surprised that they did. And so now, with his peace restored, Coyote decided to spend the night by the creek. He lit his fire, and then he discovered that he couldn't remember how to dance. Now he's truly shocked. His instruments, his songs, his dance. What was happening to him? He felt sad and afraid, which made him feel lonely too. It was quiet though, so he went to sleep. And that night he dreamed about White Buffalo Woman, and she came to him in his dreams. And she asked him why he was out there all alone and scared. And in his dream, Coyote shared with her his frustration with his neighbors and their noise and their bother. And White Buffalo Woman just listened and let him get all of his complaints out and all of his upset. And then she said, "Coyote, don't you understand that your music and your dance and even your fire are nothing but the spirits of those creatures who are different than you? Well, Coyote hadn't thought about that. But in his dream, he realized that by ignoring his friends and sending them away, he had lost something very important. He knew he had to go back to where he was from, and what he needed to do was accept all of those creatures again back into his heart, and accept them as they were, as the creatures that they were, in order for him to be happy and whole again, and not feel sad or afraid or alone. So in the morning, Coyote packed up and he headed back the way he had come. And when the birds sang, he stopped and listened to them very carefully. And he let their songs leak into his heart. And that night, when he made a fire on the edge of the marsh, he discovered he could dance again. So the next day, he discovered, as he moved closer to the marsh, that Moose was standing there. And this time, instead of ignoring him, he asked Moose how to get across the marsh. And Moose showed him the way to a dry path. When he was on the other side of the marsh, he made a fire again that night. And this time, not only could he remember to dance, he could remember how to dance and play his flute. And he didn't feel as scared or lonely as he had before. The next day, he walked on toward his original home, and as he crested a hill, who did he see but Rabbit? And he was so delighted to see Rabbit, because she jumped and played, and he decided, well, I might as well join the crowd. And so they jumped and played and hopped around together, romping and having a good time. And as they walked back, she accompanied him back to their old home. And that night, when he built his fire, Coyote could sing his songs, he could drum his drum, he could dance his dance, and now he had a whole new appreciation for his friends. And he never forgot how easily he could lose his music, his dance, or his fire. How was that story? Good one? I like that one too. I just love that one. So let's let you go back to your class. We can sing to you and make an arch if you like, please. I'm glad you came in to see us. Have fun.
Go now in peace, go now in peace. May the love of all surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go.
We're going, our reading this morning is going to be in our hymnal. So that's why you have one. Please open your hymnal in the back to reading 657. 657. It's by Sophia Lyon-Fawes and titled, It Matters What We Believe. So I'm going to, those of you at home, I'm sorry you don't, if you have your hymnal at home, please look it up. But if you don't, listen to the words and enjoy hearing your colleagues in faith read along. I'm going to read the plain text, and then I'm going to ask you to read the part in italics, please. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged.
Other beliefs are expansive and lead the way into wider and deeper sympathies.
Some beliefs are like shadows, clouding children's days with fears of unknown calamities.
Other beliefs are like sunshine, blessing children with the warmth of happiness.
Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies.
Other beliefs are bonds in a world community, where sincere differences beautify the pattern.
Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction.
Other beliefs are like gateways, opening wide vistas for exploration.
Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness.
Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth.
Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a charging and changing world.
Other beliefs are pliable, like a young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life.
Let's just take a nice deep breath on that one. Just want to acknowledge the gifts and the commitment that support this congregation and keep you together. And part of that comes from the gifts of money that you provide to take care of the building and to take care of one another and to have activities together. And I want to acknowledge those and tell you how grateful I know each of you is for the gifts that you are able to bring and that others bring to this congregation. If you wish to leave a financial contribution today, the plate is somewhere. Christine knows where the plate is. Good morning. I know that it takes a lot of time and energy and commitment to keep a congregation going, and I really appreciate the work that you do.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
Thank you. And while you're up, Ms. Lorna, it's time for us to share joys and challenges this morning. So I will give you.
Shall I pause the recording?
Yes, please. So let's sing together one I know you know, because I've heard you sing it. Spirit of Life is number 123. You don't remember what it is. Awesome.
You want piano?
If you can, I'd love it, Sean. Thank you. That makes everybody feel
It's one of the
better.
ones I'm confident on, so yeah, can't squander this
Let's give
opportunity.
her the chance to be confident. Everybody stand up this time.
Piano Pam.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Say
discernment hat. The last time I was here with you, we started to talk about Unitarian Universalism's 8 principles. The value statements that encapsulate the essence of what our faith tradition is about in the world. We talked at that time about the challenges and the joys of Principle 1, about honoring every person's inherent worth and dignity as part of our daily practice. Now, I want to reiterate that our 8 principles are a covenant, a promise, a statement that applies to our congregations, not necessarily to us personally. But my experience is that most Unitarian Universalists choose to adopt those 8 principles as a personal commitment as well. It becomes a roadmap of behaviors and values to strive to practice in service to creating a better world for all of us. Today we're going to continue that journey and go toward looking at principle number 2, which is about justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. And number 3, about acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Now, let's look at those just a little bit further. And for those of you who don't know, the principles, if you want to look at them, are in the hymnal right in the front of the book, so you can have a look at them. You'll notice when you look at them, or when you hear them, that each principle asks us to offer one another a variety of gifts of grace, so to speak. We're to make sure every person with whom we are in relationship receives justice, equity, and compassion in our dealings with them. And we are also to accept one another, whoever we are and however we present ourselves. And we are asked to encourage not only our individual, but our congregational spiritual growth. Just so you know, the 8 principles are not sort of a laundry list kind of principles. It isn't, you'll notice that it isn't offer people justice or equity or compassion. It's to incorporate all 3 in our interactions. And it says we accept one another and we encourage spiritual growth. And this might be something relatively easy to do when all of the circumstances are right. You know, everybody's getting along and there are no differences of opinion. Everyone is equally situated in life, on and on and on. But it does get a little bit harder to remain within the intent of our principles and even perhaps our own commitment to them when there are different points of view and there's some kind of interpersonal tension, or there are other kinds of misalignments between people. And I'm sure if you think of examples in your own life, things probably pop to mind. So first, let's look at principle 2. Justice is the concept of treating people fairly and giving them what they deserve. It is used in terms of making sure that people don't get hurt, but if they do get hurt, that they are remediated, that things are put back the right way. Equity means providing for others by acknowledging that we do not all start from the same place and making adjustments for those imbalances. Whether that's about our racial identification, our sexuality, our education level, our income, whatever that might be. And compassion arises when we are confronted with another person's suffering, and from that, we feel motivated to relieve their suffering, to make life easier for them. So just to give you a very pertinent example, and one that I know you're familiar with, the intersection of these states often becomes more clear when we consider our quote unquote, in my opinion, justice system of law enforcement and trials and the consequences of unlawful behavior. Some people will say that if you do the crime, you should expect to do the time, and there should be no exceptions to that rule. And they prefer that there be a set outcome or consequence for specific actions that is applied equally to any person convicted of committing that crime. So if you do a third-class felony, you spend 5 years in prison, there's no early parole, everybody gets the same thing. Now, an example of equity might appear when those who are accused come from a different set of circumstances, such as people who are racially identified as a group of people disproportionately represented in jails, perhaps, an equity-deserving group, or treatment programs, or in poverty or in contact with the police. Now, an appeal to equity would ask that a person's extenuating circumstances be considered as a part of determining their guilt, their innocence, and whatever sentence they may be given. And compassion is that feeling that arises in us when we hear about the circumstances of other people's lives, be they temporary or more long-lasting and current or historical, and from that we feel motivated to relieve that, experience that suffering in their life. Feeling compassion is a feeling, doesn't necessarily mean that we take action, but rather that we are emotionally impacted by another's circumstances and situation, and at the very least, we wish we could do something to make those circumstances better. It's a little different for Unitarian Universalists because in our principle, we actually imply that action should be taken by our commitment to affirm and promote these values, these principles in human relations. That's in that original statement there, that's sort of the preamble. Now, from that explanation, I'm sure you gather that justice, equity, and compassion are included in this principle, but they're not equivalent concepts. And as we learn more about our principles, we can see that they set a very high standard for us that can be complex and challenging to implement. These are statements that ask us to really, really think, to consider alternatives and other points of view, to engage in dialogue and listen to the input of others, and then to very thoughtfully consider what they mean to us and how they will impact our choices as we go forward. What would we expect to see in the world around us if justice and equity and compassion were all a part of the equation? Now, I think it is important to acknowledge that our principles are given to us as aspirations. It would be hard, I think, for most of us to look at the entire scope of the world and go, yeah, justice, equity, compassion, they're always there, I see them all the time. We're not expected, and we personally are not expected to be fully realized and completely congruent in every situation in our lives. We are, after all, acknowledged humans. But our principles outline an ideal vision of what our faith endorses as a way to make the world work better for all of us. Remember, we talked about in the first principle, every person's inherent worth and dignity, meaning justice, equity, and compassion should be available for everyone, as should being accepted when we get to principle 3. So if we choose to adopt the principles as our personal statement of intent, we do it knowing that there are times when we'll hopefully do a great job, as well as times when, for a variety of reasons, we don't get it quite right. What it doesn't say is, if we can't get it, we just give up. It says, no, these are our aspirations and we will keep trying. As I mentioned before, there are times when I wish that I'd been able to find an easier spiritual path. I remember being not involved, I wasn't a member, but I used to go with my great-grandmother to her church, which was an evangelical Pentecostal kind of church. And she got told exactly what to do and not to do. I thought, wow, somebody could just tell me. But that didn't work for me, so here I am. And I don't consider myself by any means spiritually lazy, but being a UU is challenging and it requires constant effort to truly embrace and practice fully, as I've talked about before. Our values, our vision, our principles all ask us to aspire to something better for the world than anything the world has ever known. I know that's a tall order, it's a monumental undertaking, but we don't accept that just because it hasn't been done before, it's impossible to do. Although certainly sometimes the circumstances in the world do make it hard to hold on to that hope and that vision. So let's look at principle 3, where we are to accept one another as well as encourage spiritual growth in our congregations. Again, that first part asks us to accept one another openly and unreservedly, to see the whole person and embrace it all without expectation of change or the need to act small to please other people or to mask who we are so people will accept us because we're somehow trying to look more like we're normal or usual or what people expect. And then, again, this is one of those dichotomy things where in the second phrase, we're asked to encourage growth. And we all know that growth doesn't come from letting things stay the way they are. Growth requires that we come to some insight, some feedback perhaps we get about where we are, what we're doing, and saying, oh, I didn't realize that, or I see how that impacts you, or that wasn't my intent, but I understand that my intent did not translate well. And so here we are, asking that we accept people and then potentially asking people to make changes, to become a more perhaps principled person in their actions and behaviors and their thinking. I think the principle is asking us to let people be themselves in an environment, in this case, in a congregational community, that demonstrates the value of examining and re-examining our perspectives in the face of new information, new insights, and new learning. I think it's easier for all of us to give ourselves permission to make change when we are in a community that demonstrates that this is a norm, this is a thing we do. We all do this, we're all open to change, we're all open to feedback, we're all open to insight. I think it's saying that, we accept you within our circle as you are, and we love you, and there's also room for you to grow spiritually as you spend more time here and with this faith that we all embrace. And it's asking us to have faith with one another and patience as we navigate our lives. Some behaviors need to be addressed right away. If someone's behavior is disruptive and it's impacting the community, we are asked to step forward and talk about how their worth and dignity is imposing on our worth and dignity. I probably said this in my last sermon, but one of the things I've often heard in congregations is, we can't tell that person to, behave differently, that what they're doing is against our principles and our values, because that would impinge on their worth and dignity. And I've often had interesting conversations about at what point does your worth and dignity brush up against their worth and dignity, and changes need to be made, feedback needs to be given, and there needs to be a call to come back into covenant and behave appropriately, change their way of thinking, and respect the congregation's worth and dignity as well as their own. That our experience, we hope that people find out, that our experience will lead us to see opportunities that are there for us if we take on new attitudes, if we look at things from a different perspective, if we put ourselves in others' shoes, we find new behaviors and new approaches. We make peace with ourselves and our past, our strengths and our flaws, and then we offer ourselves the opportunity to become more exquisitely amazing as the people that we are. I absolutely love the quote from Maya Angelou, where she says, "Do the best you can until you know better." And then when you know better, do better. And I really think that that's what Principle 3 is challenging us to create for ourselves personally and within our congregation, a place where we can find out what might be better and we can change and we can do better. When you read our principles, I think one of the things you realize that is that our vision is vast, and it's as vast as our hope. Our yearning is deep, but so is our commitment. Our principles are broad, and so is our embrace of possibility. And so we apply ourselves to the work that we find is ours to do in this time and in this place. Talking with Christine earlier, we're talking about in times of challenge and turbulence, we are reminded again and again of the importance of community, of having a place where we can show up and feel accepted, challenged appropriately in a loving way, but a place where we know we can go and our soul is safe because people accept us and love us. And also, I love another quote that I found that I had for a long time where Albert Einstein is quoted to have said, "We cannot solve old problems with the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." Old ways do not solve continuing or new problems. And as a comfort, sometimes, I tell myself, and I remember that I'm not responsible, we are not responsible for the actions and the choices and the behaviors of our ancestors. Humans as well, they did some good things and they did some things about which now we look at and feel perhaps guilt or shame or disgust. What we are accountable for are the actions and choices that we are making now. We are responsible for this life and what we are doing. And again, sometimes we're going to get it right and sometimes we don't. It's important to remember that love continues always to be at the center of our faith. Love is at the center of every one of our principles. It's in all that we do, and that is so important in the UU context. We're not talking about how flawed or sinful or how awful or how broken we are. We share that information because it helps us continue to grow and examine and look for ways to be different in our lives. The center is about love and loving each other back into covenant or into covenant, loving each other into a better place. And for that, we have to love each other enough to stick together and try again. And we can celebrate when we do something well, and we experience a transition in our ways of being as individuals and as a community. So I continue and will continue to remind you to strive to make your efforts from a good intent and always consider the impacts of what you're going to do. If it doesn't go the way you hoped, well then be prepared to say, "I'm sorry. I can see that didn't impact quite the way I hoped. What can I do better?" And then shut up and listen. That's an important part of that process. Sometimes I know when I am caught out in doing something that wasn't as I intended, it wasn't what my heart wanted, I immediately want to start devoting a lot of time and energy to figuring out my excuses and my reasons, and then I want to blurt those out as if that will dull the impact that I've had on someone. And I'm learning as I get older that the important thing is to do the exact opposite and say, "I'm sorry," mean it, and to ask, "What can I do better?" And then shut up and listen. It takes a good bit of humility to change your mind and your life and your behavior. But keep up the good work. And be neither careless nor a coward as you move toward living a more principled life. I've heard it said that there are only two ways to face the future, with love or with fear. And I'm going to ask you to consider making all of your choices about moving forward with love. There are a lot of reasons for that, of course, but mostly because fear is just too great a burden to bear. Make your life a testament to your living faith, to your commitment to change, even if it's only your ability to change one small thing right now, one act at a time. It's important, it's meaningful, and we are an action-based faith. We tell people it isn't about believing a particular thing, because we value deeds, not creeds. So what we do learn is learn from our history, experience our own reactions and feelings, we examine those, and then we use our new understandings and commitments to propel ourselves toward creating a more healed world. Sometimes I know it feels like marching uphill. There are risks. We won't always get it right. Not everyone will always agree with me. We won't always live our values perfectly, but we can make the commitment to make the effort each and every day. It's a triumph when we get it right. And it's a lot to ask. But I think we all know that the world needs nothing less. Amen. I'm going to ask now that you take a time for being with yourself and your soul by a bit of meditation this morning. So, let's all join in a barking meditation. I like it.
Sorry about
That's okay. Please find a comfortable place for yourself. If you are able, take things out of your hands and off your lap so that you just have yourself. Make sure you're touching yourself, hands on lap. An important component of this is to make sure you breathe. So breathe deeply. And listen to the words and let yourself be. These are words from Nancy Wood. The earth is all that lasts. The earth is what I speak to when I do not understand my life, nor why I am not heard. The earth answers me with the same song that it sang to my fathers and mothers when their tears covered the sun. The earth sings a song of gladness. The earth sings a song of praise. The earth rises up and laughs at me each time that I forget how spring begins with winter and death begins with birth. And when you feel ready, come back to the space shared between us. Breathe deeply. Open your eyes. Christine, I'm going to ask you to extinguish the chalice. And William, you'll put put up those words, we will say them together.
Absolutely.
We gather to light this chalice. We heart the flame lit within us and inspired communion.